The roast was still warm. The Christmas lights blinked quietly in the corner. My mother, Margot, had set the table like she always did. Linen napkins, her grandmother's silver, and a centerpiece of white candles and cranberries. It was supposed to be a quiet dinner, just 5 of us. My father, Richard, was carving the meat. He always acted like Christmas dinner was some kind of performance, polished, controlled. My younger sister Chloe was scrolling on her phone, chewing on a chipped nail. She hadn't said much. She never did when she was in trouble. I had known something was coming. I just didn't know it would hit like that. He set the knife down, wiped his hands on the towel, and then slammed his fist against the table. The wine glasses rattled. The dog barked from the laundry room. "You either help your sister," my father snapped, "or get the hell out of this house." The room went still. Chloe didn't look up. My mom stared into her glass like it had instructions printed at the bottom. No one said anything. Except me. Or rather, I didn't say anything at all. I looked around the table. At the man who used to quiz me on math tables in the car. At the woman who once braided my hair before my first job interview. At the sister I had loaned rent money to more times than I could count. Then I stood up. The chair scraped back across the hardwood with a sound like tearing. I folded my napkin slowly and set it on the table. I walked toward the door, picked up my coat, and left. No yelling, no crying, just silence. What they didn't know was I wasn't just walking out of a dinner. I was walking away from 20 years of being the fallback plan, the fixer, the family accountant. And what I still don't understand is this. I wasn't always silent. There were years when I raised my hand first, when I offered before anyone asked. I was the good daughter, the steady one, the one who understood APR rates before high school ended, who set up her parents' online banking, who brought Chloe home from college the second time she dropped out. When she overdosed in a motel off the I-25, it was me the hospital called. I left work, picked her up, held a trash bag for her to throw up into while we waited at urgent care. Then I paid the bill. When she maxed out her 4th credit card, it was me who created a debt snowball spreadsheet, color-coded and laminated because I still believed she just needed better tools. When she asked me to co-sign a lease because her credit was a little dinged, I did it, even though I had to lie to my bank and say she was a reliable tenant. My parents called me smart, strong, reliable, like those were compliments, but they never came with protection. Just more responsibility. My mother once said, "Chloe's just not built like you. She needs more support." Like I came with extra scaffolding. Like resilience was something I owed them because I had more of it. And every time Chloe spiraled, it was me they called, not her sponsors, not the cops, not the therapists. Me. The last time she relapsed, I picked her up from a gas station parking lot in my own coat. She had lost hers somewhere between the casino and wherever she'd passed out. I wrapped her in mine. I gave her soup. I stayed up all night to make sure she didn't seize. And then 2 days later, 2 days, she unfriended me on Facebook. No fight, no explanation, just gone. I asked her about it. She said, "I just didn't want judgment in my feed right now." That was the moment I stopped offering. Not out of anger, not out of pride, but because I realized I had become a line item in her cycle. Help, use, reset, repeat. My parents never brought it up, never asked why I stopped checking in. I think they were relieved. It meant they didn't have to deal with the space between us. They could just keep assigning me the same role, the one who pays, the one who shows up, the one who never complains. I didn't go back the next morning, not for stockings, not for cinnamon rolls. Not for my mother's brittle, cracked voice in 5 voicemails that all began with Harper, honey, and ended with, "We didn't mean it like that." I didn't answer the group text from my cousin asking what happened. I didn't explain myself to anyone, because how do you explain that what happened wasn't sudden, that it had been happening quietly for years? That dinner was just the moment the script ran out. I blocked Chloe's number first, then Mom. Then Dad, one by one, like closing tabs I should have exited years ago. At first, the silence was terrifying. I was used to the noise, the chaos. Chloe's late-night texts, "Can I borrow $300? My dad's reminders to move his mutual funds, my mom's guilt-drenched voicemails full of sighs and strings. I had built my life around being their emergency exit, their plan B. But now? Silence. The kind of silence that feels like you've stepped off a treadmill still spinning. I didn't know what to do with it, so I just sat still. And then, 3 days after Christmas, my manager at Aspen and Reed pulled me into her office. She was calm, professional, the kind of person who only called you in when something had to be handled. "There's a man," she said, "who's been calling the front desk. Repeatedly. Says he's your father." I felt the air shift. My palms went cold. She continued, "He left voicemails. Accused you of abandoning your family. Said you had a moral obligation to your sister." Her voice was careful, neutral. "I'm not here to judge, but this can't bleed into work. You understand?" I nodded. I apologized. I left her office with my ears ringing. That night, I blocked their landline. Then, I went into my phone and blocked their backup numbers too. Because at that point, it wasn't a boundary anymore. It was self-defense. But I still think about that day in her office. The way my manager looked at me. Not angry, just confused. Like she couldn't match the words, abandoning her family with the employee who always stayed late to help the interns. And I wonder, how many times did they tell that version of the story, the one where I'm the villain? And how many people believed it, because it came from someone who once called me his pride? The call came on a Thursday afternoon. Unknown number. I almost let it ring out. But something in my chest buzzed. That low ache you get when something is wrong, even before you know what it is. A nurse's voice. Calm, clipped. "You're listed as Chloe Lane's emergency contact. She's at St. Anthony's. Stable now, but she was found unconscious in a parking lot." She said Chloe had no ID. Her phone was shattered. Someone had recognized her from a shelter visit and called it in. I asked if she'd be okay. The nurse hesitated. "She's responsive, but she's bruised, badly." I went. Of course I did. Not because I still played the role, but because I'm not a monster. I walked into that hospital room, and it was like stepping into a life I no longer lived. Chloe was there, half sitting in the bed, arms blotched with purple and yellow, one eye swollen, bandages on her knuckles. Our mother sat beside her, clutching a tissue like it was her last thread of purpose. When she saw me, she whispered, "Thank God." I didn't answer. I stood at the foot of the bed, hands in my coat pockets, staring at a sister I once drove across state lines to save. And I felt nothing. Not anger, not grief, just a dull quiet, until my father walked in. He didn't look at Chloe, didn't ask the nurse anything. He walked straight up to me, shoulders stiff, voice full of thunder. "This is what happens when family doesn't stick together." I looked at him, looked through him maybe. Then I said, "No. This is what happens when you enable someone so long, you forget what accountability even looks like. When you punish the people who set boundaries, instead of the ones who shatter them." He opened his mouth. I turned and walked out. I didn't wait for his reply. I already knew what it would be. The envelope arrived 2 days later. No return address. Just my full name, typed in all caps, and the thud of official weight when it hit the floor under my mail slot. I knew before I opened it. I didn't open it. I stared at it for a long time, sitting cross-legged on my hallway floor, the envelope on the tiles like a quiet threat. Then I stood, picked it up, and slid it into a drawer without a word. 2 hours later, I called an attorney. His name was Matthew Klein. Mid-40s, soft-spoken, wore reading glasses on a chain, and had a reputation for handling family financial abuse cases. I brought him everything: the screenshots, the Venmo receipts, the group texts, the bank withdrawals I never agreed to but couldn't say no to, the emails with subject lines like "Urgent, Chloe again," and "Can you just cover it, Harper?" Color-coded spreadsheets, dated breakdowns, a printed transcript of the voicemail my father left at my workplace, the one that said I had a moral duty to help blood. Klein flipped through the binder, didn't speak for 10 minutes. Then he looked up and said, "You've done 80% of the work already. This isn't just defense. This is counteroffense. We didn't just file a motion to dismiss. We filed a counterclaim. Emotional harassment, coercive financial abuse, workplace defamation. We attached witness statements from my co-workers, including Ava from reception, who had taken the call from my father and thought she was being pranked, until he started yelling. And then I took it one step further. I petitioned to be legally released from any future financial liability regarding Chloe Lane, citing emotional strain, medical documentation from my therapist, and a detailed impact analysis on my savings, credit, and career. The first hearing was set for February 10th. My father didn't show. The second, he arrived late, grumbling in a stained polo, muttering about betrayal and ungrateful children. My mother sat outside in the hallway and never entered. Chloe came, wore sunglasses, didn't look at me. She sat with a man, maybe a boyfriend, maybe just another person she'd pulled into her orbit. The judge took one look at the evidence and said, "There's no obligation here, not legal, not moral, case dismissed." And just like that, the power shifted. It didn't feel triumphant. It felt like exhaling for the first time in years. Later that night, a letter arrived. From my father. Sealed with a wax stamp, the kind he used for birthday cards and wedding invitations. I didn't open that one either. I slid it into the same drawer. Not out of fear, not out of anger. Just peace. I didn't plan to post about it. Not really. But one night, maybe a week after the court dismissed the case, I was sitting in my new apartment, scrolling aimlessly, and I landed on a thread. Adult children of toxic families. What finally made you cut ties? I read it all. Every comment. Stories that felt like echoes. Different names. Same wounds. So I opened a blank post, titled it something plain. My family sued me for not saving my sister. Here's how I fought back. I didn't name names, didn't include photos, just the truth. I told the story straight. The Christmas dinner, the silence, the hospital, the lawsuit. I uploaded redacted screenshots, timelines, links to resources. I wrote like I was trying to explain it to someone who still believed love meant sacrifice. Then I hit post and closed the laptop. By morning, it had thousands of upvotes, hundreds of comments, people tagging their siblings, people thanking me, people saying, "I thought I was the only one." One comment stayed with me. "Your story gave me permission to stop answering midnight calls." Thank you. But the twist came 2 days later. An anonymous DM. A writer. Freelance. She said she was working on a piece about financial abuse within families and how adult children were starting to push back. In court, in public, in silence. She wanted to feature my story. No names, no photos, just the details. I said yes. The article went viral. It was on the homepage of 3 platforms by the weekend. Of course, anyone who knew the full story would recognize it. The lawsuit, the hospital, the voicemail at my job. That week, my old landlord texted me. "Saw that piece. Hope you're okay. Brave of you." A coworker left a post-it on my desk. "For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing." And then came the letter. Typed, formal. No return address, but sealed with my father's initials. I didn't open that one either. I held it in my hand for a moment, not trembling, not curious, just still. Then I slid it into the same drawer as the lawsuit envelope, one behind the other, like chapters I had read but no longer needed to reread. And when I closed the drawer, I realized something. Maybe silence is its own kind of response. Maybe peace isn't earned. Maybe it's reclaimed. It had been months. No calls, no emails, no court notices, just stillness. I'd settled into a rhythm that felt new. My apartment stayed quiet. My phone only rang when it should. I had friends over sometimes, not many, just enough to fill the silence with laughter instead of tension. I thought that was the end of it. The legal battle had closed, my family had gone silent, and I wasn't looking back. Then came the text, a number I didn't recognize. No emojis, no long story. Just, I know you probably hate me. I'm in a different place now. I've been in recovery for 6 months. I wanted to say thank you for walking away. It forced me to stand up. I'm sorry for everything. It was Ava. I stared at the message for a long time. Not because it hurt, but because it didn't. There was a time when those words would have undone me, would have sent me racing to call her back, to fix things, to fall back into the same old cycle. But I had changed. I wasn't angry. I wasn't numb. Just steady. I typed slowly. I don't hate you. I'm glad you're healing, but I can't be part of your story anymore. And I meant it, not from cruelty, from clarity. She didn't reply, and I didn't expect her to. I sat on my balcony that night, watching the city flicker below, and for the first time, I didn't feel haunted by what I'd left behind. I didn't hear my father's voice calling me ungrateful, didn't hear my mother's silence, just the wind and my own breath. It arrived on a Thursday, a pale envelope tucked neatly in my mailbox. No return address, but the initials on the back gave it away. WMM. My father's. I held it for a moment, feeling the weight of it, not just the paper, but the years behind it. The shouting across the dinner table, the courtroom stairs, the fists, the silence. I didn't open it. Not out of fear, out of peace. I set it on the counter, then later, tucked it into a drawer in the hall, the one I almost never open. Not to hide it, but to remind myself. Closure doesn't always need a conversation. Sometimes it's just a choice not to go back. That weekend, I packed up my old files, all the notes, screenshots, voicemails, the ones I used in court, the ones I once clutched like armor. I scanned what I needed, then fed the paper through a shredder. The noise was loud, mechanical, final. I didn't cry. I just watched the strips fall, neat and thin, like the past giving way to air. I moved apartments not long after. The old place had served its purpose, held my pain like walls hold heat. But I needed somewhere lighter, somewhere with more windows, somewhere no one had ever raised their voice at me. I bought a new couch, one I picked for softness, not practicality, and I placed it in front of a window that caught the morning light. That became my ritual. Coffee at 7:15, sitting in stillness, sometimes reading, sometimes nothing, just letting the quiet wrap around me like a soft blanket. One morning, months later, I found myself reaching for that drawer again. Not for the letter, not for any reason at all, really. Just to look. The envelope was still there, unopened, edges clean, no dust. I held it again, but this time there was no pull, no ache, just a pulse of gratitude, not for what had happened, but for what hadn't, for the words I never let back in. I slipped the envelope into a small wooden box I'd bought at a crafts fair, handmade, unlabeled, locked, and I placed that box high on a shelf, not because I needed it, but because I didn't. That was the last thing I saved. Not out of hope, not for someday, just to remember who I used to be. Since then, my life's been quiet, not perfect, but mine. I still flinch sometimes when people say, "Can I ask you for something?" But I pause, I breathe, and I ask myself, is this mine to carry? And if it's not, I let it go. The final gift of silence is that it teaches you what deserves your voice, and what deserves nothing at all. If you've ever left the door unopened, not out of fear but freedom, just leave a dot, that's all. We'll understand.